I'm Jeff Perlman, founder and CEO of Xojo, and in this video I'm going to give you an overview of Xojo Cloud. So Xojo Cloud is great for deploying web apps very easily. Xojo Cloud servers are easy to configure. I'll be showing you the control panel. It makes it super simple. It also has built-in SSL support, so you don't need to monkey with SSL certificates and all that. It's super simple for SSL. And it provides best-of-class security. And I'll give you some more details about that later in the video. Now, every Xojo Cloud server has PostgreSQL and MySQL, so if you need to use a database server with your web app, those are there. And it provides automatic load balancing, which I'll explain in a bit. And if you're building iOS apps and using notifications, Xojo Cloud provides a remote notification service for your iOS apps that's built in. And last but not least, Xojo Cloud servers are managed by us. We handle all the maintenance and backups. You don't have to worry about a thing. And that's really great because honestly, half of the problem of a web app is writing the web app, but the other half of it is deploying it. Unlike a desktop app or a mobile app where it's deployed to a device, web apps are deployed to public servers that are accessible to the internet, and that makes for a whole lot of other things that need to be considered and configured, and we take care of all that for you. So let's start with deployment. Deployment's really easy. If you haven't done this before, in your Xojo web project, just go to Build Settings in the Navigator and click on Xojo Cloud. This, of course, is once you've ordered a Xojo Cloud server from us, and those take, once you order them from our website, they take about 20 minutes to be available after we configure them. So you click Xojo Cloud. Second step is to go to the inspector, give your application a name, pick the server. It will show up in the Xojo IDE under that server menu automatically. Enter a domain name. And then in the toolbar, go ahead and click the deploy button. It's really that simple, 1, 2, 3. And that gives you unlimited app deployment. You can deploy as many apps as you want. Some restrictions apply, of course. All the apps that you deploy are going to use RAM. They all use CPU. So the more apps you have and the more connections you have to those apps, obviously the processing power and RAM are all being shared by those. So that's just something you need to consider. And we'll talk more about how you can scale things up in a bit. Now, in terms of domain names, you've got two options. You can use your own domain if you'd like, or you can use a xojocloud.net subdomain. Now, if you want to use your own domain, in the inspector, just type in your domain in the domain name field. And if you're going to use your own domain, make sure you go to whoever provides your domain name and point the domain at the IP address for your Xojo Cloud server. And I'll show you where to find that in a bit on the Xojo Cloud control panel. Now, if you're going to use a subdomain of xojocloud.net, just enter the domain name you want to use, or rather the subdomain, .xojocloud.net. It's that simple. Now, obviously, those all have to be unique. So if you've chosen something that's already in use, you're going to get a message that tells you that, and you can just pick a different name and go from there. Now, you may have noticed that there was a statistics button in the inspector. If you click that, then this panel comes up, and you can leave this running in the IDE while you work, and it will show you CPU, memory, network usage, etc., for the whole server. And then if you have multiple applications in the pane below, you can pick an application and you can see how that particular application is doing. And this chart will update live over time. So that's a great way to just get an idea of how your server is performing. If you have users that are saying, hey, it's getting a little sluggish, maybe there's not enough RAM, maybe you need a bigger server, that kind of thing. Well, watching the traffic and the usage on this statistics window can really help you figure that out. Now, in terms of configuring a server, it's really, really simple. Just go to our website and go to Xojo Cloud under the Buy menu, and you just pick a server. There's small, medium, and large. As you can expect, they vary in terms of how much RAM, disk you have, and virtual CPUs. Basically, everything doubles as the server size increases from small, medium to large. Now, once you pick a server, there are 9 locations scattered across the globe. You can pick which one makes sense for you. If your users are in a particular area of the world, then it probably makes sense to pick the data center that is closest to where your users are. And again, once you've finished ordering your server from us, it'll spin up once the system is installed, the OS and all the software is ready. That, again, takes about 20 minutes. Once you've done that, you can go to our website, log in, and go to the Xojo Cloud control panel. And that will show you all of your apps. You can quit an app, you can delete an app, etc. You can also see the size of the server. You can see this one's a small server, and it will show you the IP address as well to the right of the size. There's also a menu there, and we'll get to that in a minute. So in the control panel, there are 2 tabs, apps and options. Apps is obviously for dealing with individual apps running on your server. And then the options tab is for things at the server level itself, server level features. So this is where you can enable Postgres and or MySQL with a checkbox. If you want your server to be accessible via SFTP, you can turn that on. Same with SSH tunnel. And if you want SSL, just check the SSL checkbox and it will walk you through configuring that. It's very, very simple. Also, while you can use our built-in SSL at no extra charge, and again, extremely simple to configure, if you have a wildcard certificate or if your organization requires you to use a certain SSL certificate, that will provide an option for using those as well. And then finally, you can manage APN certificates. Now, you're probably wondering, perhaps, well, what is an APN? An APN is an Apple push notification. So if you're using notifications with an iOS app, that's where these come in handy. Now, if you've never dealt with notifications on the programming side, there are basically 2 types. There are local notifications and there are remote notifications. So a local notification is one that happens completely locally on the device. For example, the Reminders app on iOS, you set a reminder for a date and time, and the app, when it gets to that date and time, it creates a notification on your device. So it's completely local. But there's other times where you have an application somewhere, and that application is monitoring criteria, and when a criteria occurs that it wants to notify users of, that's probably running on a server somewhere, you want to then have it go out to whatever devices need to get a notification. That's a remote notification. And you've probably had one of these happen if you have a smartphone, which practically everybody does, where you're not even in the app, you didn't set anything, but then you get a notification from the app about something, maybe a new story in a news app, that kind of thing. Well, that's a remote notification. So how do those work? This is one of the places where Xojo Cloud helps to make this easier. So if you've got your app that's, again, looking for some criteria to occur, maybe you have a database server and you're looking for records that need to be that require a notification to some number of users. But anyway, you have this app. Maybe that app is running on a Xojo Cloud server. But either way, the app can then use remote notifications to tell Xojo Cloud to then send that to Apple, send the notification to Apple, and Apple's push notification servers then send it out to all the devices that you've said need to receive this notification. So that's basically how it works. Now, there are services out there that do this. They do charge for this. With Xojo Cloud, it's built in. So if you need a Xojo Cloud server, you know that you have this automatically to use if you're building an iOS app and you need notifications. And in that case, check out the Xojo Cloud Remote Notifications module that's in the framework. Now, Xojo Cloud also does automatic load balancing of your web apps. And what does that mean? Well, let's say you've got a small Xojo Cloud server. It has 2 virtual CPUs. Now, those 2 virtual CPUs get used in different ways. The first one is used by the OS itself. That's running on one virtual CPU. The second one is running your app. That's pretty straightforward. So in this case, that single instance of your app on that virtual CPU is handling all of the traffic. And if you don't have too many users all at once, that might be just fine. That might be plenty. But as your app grows, or as you have more and more users accessing the app, let's say you've got that kind of a model where there could be more and more people that need to access the app, then you may need to have more bandwidth for your application. So maybe you get a medium server. Now, a medium server has 4 CPUs, virtual CPUs. So like a small server, one of those is used by the OS, but then the other 3 are used to create, or rather to run, instances of your app. So instead of there being just one instance of your app running on a virtual CPU, in this case, you're going to have 3 instances of your app running on that virtual CPU. And that means that as users connect to your app, they're going to be distributed among, or balanced, right? The load is balanced among those 3 instances. And this is something you need to think about if you're doing anything where you're treating the app as a single app. For example, let's say you wanted to know how many current connections there are. Well, if you get the session count from the framework, it's only going to tell you how many sessions there are for a single instance. So you'd need to write that out to a database or a file somewhere and have each instance do that so that you can then aggregate those values to find out how many sessions there are total. So anyway, with a medium server, you'd have 3. And if you have multiple applications running on a medium server, then you'd have 3 instances of each application, on each virtual CPU. So each virtual CPU would run an instance of each of your apps. Now, that's a medium server. You move up to a large server. Well, now you've got 7 instances of your app running because there are 7 virtual CPUs available beyond the initial one that's running the OS. So that just allows it to handle even more concurrent connections, which is essentially what this is all about. Now, if you get to the point where you've got a lot of users and even a large server isn't really enough, in that case, we can set up custom load balancing for you. And as you can imagine, the way this is done is we create a series of large servers, however many you feel you need, and then we can put the load balancer above those servers itself. So then you've got 7 virtual CPUs per large server, and you could have any number of large servers. So you can see how this would result in Xojo Cloud being able to scale up from a single instance on a small server to virtually as many servers as you need. And by the way, Xojo Cloud can also be used as a database server for desktop applications. So even if you're not building a web app, the SSH tunnel feature, the purpose of turning that on is to allow your desktop app to tunnel through to a Xojo Cloud server in order to use the database server like Postgres or MySQL. Also, if we set up custom load balancing for you like this, another thing that we can do for you is we can, assuming you're using a database, Postgres or MySQL, for example, we can move the database server to its own server and a dedicated server just for the database. And then we can remove that server from the internet and create a secure tunnel between that server and your web app servers, your regular Xojo Cloud servers. This is just an extra level of security so that someone that's, say, a hacker can't get into your database server because it's not accessible to the internet. It's really only accessible to your Xojo Cloud servers. Now, in terms of configuration, there's a little gear menu on your Xojo Cloud control panel. You click on that, and this gives you some options. You can rename your server, you can restart it, you can delete it, and you'll get a warning before you do that. So don't worry if you accidentally select that. And if you've got the control panel open and you deploy a new app, you can choose refresh apps just to get the control panel to update so you can see the app. And then finally, manage users. Now, what does that do? This basically allows you to indicate who can access the server and in what capacity. You can give the user the permission to deploy apps, and that's it. Manage apps, which means that, for example, they could delete an app and also deploy, and then manage the whole server, which means they can really do anything they want. And to add servers, or rather to add users to a server, there's instructions at the bottom of this dialog box that you can add a user. It's really straightforward. Now, one of the big features of Xojo Cloud is security, and there are 3 security layers to Xojo Cloud. The first one is a custom firewall. Now, this is not just a regular firewall. This is one that we had written specifically for Xojo Cloud. Now, it does some of the things you expect from a firewall. All the incoming ports are blocked by default, except for 80 and 443. Those are for HTTP and HTTPS. All of the outgoing ports are blocked by default. And if you want to have ports open under certain circumstances, built into the framework is a firewall port class. You can use this to open a port and close a port, any port you want, or multiple ports. And one of the interesting things about this is that when the instance of the firewall port class goes out of scope, all the ports that are open will be closed. So you can use this in your architecture. If you have a class that's accessing data, maybe it's calling out to some server somewhere, you can create an instance on that class, a property, let's say, holding an instance of the firewall port class, open a bunch of ports, and then when your class instance goes out of scope, the property goes out of scope, the firewall port class then goes out of scope, and all the ports get closed. So that's kind of a cool feature of the firewall port class. Now, this is not just a dumb firewall, as I mentioned before. It actually analyzes connection behavior to detect hackers. In fact, we ran into this when we were testing Xojo Cloud for the first time. Our engineers kept getting locked out because it was detecting them as being hackers. So yes, as the connection is detected, or rather the behavior is detected to be a hacker, then the IP is blocked. So anyone that tries to hack in, if it detects that they're hacking in, it's going to block their IP address, and that's the end of that. The second layer is Security Enhanced Linux. Now, what is this? Well, Security Enhanced Linux was developed by the United States National Security Agency, or NSA for short. It protects the Linux kernel from modification. It limits the ability for installed applications to do damage. That's good. But it's complicated. There's over 1,000 pages of documentation for Security Enhanced Linux. So it's impractical for individual servers. If you went and got a server just at some cloud hosting company, setting up Security Enhanced Linux probably wouldn't be all that practical because it's quite complicated. Fortunately, it's very practical for Xojo Cloud, as all of our servers are configured identically. And the third layer of security is binary applications. When you build a web application with things like HTML and JavaScript, etc., your application is really just a bunch of text files sitting on a server. If somebody gets through your security, then they can get to your intellectual property. In the case of Xojo Cloud, or really Xojo apps, we build apps as binary applications. So if someone somehow got through the security layers, they're going to be faced with megabytes and megabytes of binary code. So that's just another level of security. And as of now, Xojo Cloud has been around for 10 years. And in that 10 years, there have been billions of attempts to break into Xojo Cloud servers. And the total number of known security breaches we've had in all that time is 0. Now, it may not always be 0, but it's 0 as of this point, and that tells you just how secure Xojo Cloud is. Most hackers, though certainly not all, most hackers are really looking for a server they can use to send spam, to use for part of a denial of service attack, that sort of thing. So you want to have really good security that basically causes that kind of hacker to just move on to a less secure server somewhere else. Now let's talk about updates. Xojo Cloud is a managed service. That means we take care of updating things for you. You don't have to do any of that. That means we update the OS from time to time. And that means we install security patches for you. This is done monthly, but it can be done more often if necessary. If there's a breach that's found, or not a breach, but rather there's a security hole that's been found somewhere by a researcher and a patch has been created, we'll get that patch immediately and get it installed right away. And Xojo Cloud does backups. Now, it does a daily backup, and it's just one backup. The purpose of this is that if the server ever crashed, though we've never had that happen, or let's say something in your code made a mistake, it deleted a file or did a bad update to your database, you can contact us and we can restore your server from the backup. But do contact us immediately so we can get that done. Now, for more information on Xojo Cloud, you have a couple of sources. You want to check out our blog where we tend to write posts about Xojo Cloud. In fact, recently, Paul Lefevre, one of our engineers, wrote one about Xojo Cloud. So check that out. And of course, the documentation, which is at docs.xojo.com. There's plenty of information about Xojo Cloud there. You can also contact us via email or through the website if you have any questions about Xojo Cloud that aren't answered in the docs. So that's an overview of Xojo Cloud. If you've got any questions, again, contact us. We appreciate your continued support for Xojo. Bye for now.